Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience as we work out our technical difficulties. We are going to be joining Steph Harold this morning and talking about abortion on screen, a topic in which she is an expert. And if you haven't yet checked out our short film of the month, it is called MISO. You can find that at rePROFilm.org. And this month our topic is abortion on screen or self-managed abortion. And I'm going to see if I can connect here with Miss Steph Harold.
Oh, did we do it?
It worked.
Did it! Oh, good. I'm so excited. We did it. I'm so happy to be connected with you here, Steph. So sorry for the technical difficulties, but we got it.
No worries. No worries. I'm glad it worked.
Me too. So we are joined this morning by Steph Harold, or this afternoon, I suppose, if you're on the East Coast or elsewhere. And we're going to be discussing depictions of abortion on screen. I'm going to give a little intro to you, if that's all right, Steph.
Sure. Please go ahead.
Awesome. So, Steph Harold is a researcher with Advancing New Standards in Reproductive Health, where she studies the portrayal of abortion on television and in film in the Abortion On-Screen program. Steph has worked at abortion clinics, abortion funds, and in abortion policy. Her writings appeared in the New York Times, the American Prospect, Los Angeles Review of Books, and many other outlets. Steph currently serves on the board of directors of All Options, the only national organization providing support to people with processing pregnancy experiences. She lives in Queens, New York, with her husband and 2 young children. Welcome, Steph.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I've never done Instagram Live before, so it's fun.
We're happy to be your first. It's very exciting. I know that I very well and spoke very highly of you, and I think that you're wonderful. So we're happy. Yes. So I will kick it off with my first question to you, which is what's lacking or misleading in modern depictions of abortion on screen. You give examples of realistic and problematic abortion that you've seen on screen.
Sure. So the biggest misrepresentations that we talk about are mostly demographic ones, although there are other ones too, of course. So often when a character has an abortion on TV, it's a white character, a wealthy character, a character who's not raising children at the time of their abortion. But this is really just doesn't comport with the reality of who has abortions in real life, right? Often it's a person of color, it's someone who's raising children, it's someone who's struggling to make ends meet. So we just don't see that a lot on television. Although over the past maybe 5 years or so, we've started to see that shift a little bit. So even though the representation isn't exactly, a mirror of reality, it's getting a little bit better. So where, 10 years ago, we saw 80% of characters on TV who had abortions were white. Today, it's more like 60. So, it's changing, though really not fast enough, at least for me. We also see mostly when a character has an abortion, it's a surgical abortion or an in-clinic abortion, right? And in the US, the reality is the majority of people have medication abortions these days. And we very rarely see that on TV. We also often don't see barriers depicted to abortion care. So if a character decides that she wants an abortion, it's usually pretty easy for her to get it. She goes to the clinic. Maybe the biggest barrier she faces are protesters. And then she gets the abortion, no problem. There's no mention of, having to travel or having to, figure out if her insurance covers the abortion or not, or raising money towards the cost of the abortion. That isn't mentioned. Although, again, this past year, we started to see that more than we've ever seen it before. So I get the sense that things are shifting, and I'm very curious how that'll play out this year in particular.
Yeah. I mean, maybe with this post-row landscape that we're living in, we're going to start to see, things really have even more of a spotlight shown on it, more realistic, and especially now that we're moving into a landscape where self-managed abortion and abortion is going to be, more necessary for people to be able to access. Maybe those stories will reflect that a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah. We also, almost never see self-managed abortion with pills on TV. If we see medication abortion, it's from a provider. So I'm curious to see if, content creators will take that up and really show us like a safe, self-managed at-home abortion.
Right.
The way that your film does.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So if I have a question now, we've focused on what has happened in the past. Can you tell us about early depiction of abortion and how they influence abortion story perception, going even back in film and TV history?
Yeah. Some of the abortion depictions from the 60s and 70s are actually my favorite to talk about because people don't usually know a lot about them. There's this perception that, abortion is never depicted on screen. And the reality is that it's always been part of, cinematic and TV history. So in TV in particular, in the 60s, there are a lot of black and white TV shows that were about doctors or lawyers or detectives. And the shows like Dr. Kildare or The Defenders, the nurses that had abortion episodes, right? And often it was these male characters, doctors, again, lawyers, who were saving women from these illegal and unsafe providers. There's almost always all white characters. Abortion is almost always portrayed as dangerous, as leading to death or infertility. And it really started to link those two concepts together, that unsafe abortion and illegal abortion were the same, which I think has become pretty problematic for us now, right? Especially because, in this era we're in of safe, self-managed abortion, it's often not legal, but it is medically very safe.
Right.
So I think those pieces are things that we're having to really reckon with now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just from my own experience, self-managed abortion, use mifepristone, misoprostol. Within the first 12 weeks of pregnancy, it's extremely safe and has the same safety as using chemical. I know it's something that people don't really know, kind of wild. So, this is all kind of centering around Roe. A lot of things are changing now that Roe has fallen. I want to know how Roe affected media and public opinion about abortion. Was there backlash? I assume there was backlash. Was there maybe more depictions of abortion on screen for that? What can you tell us?
Yeah, well, the way that abortion was depicted on TV really changed after Roe. So really, there was this one pivotal moment on screen right before Roe in 1972. This Norman Lear show, a sitcom called Maude, which is often talked about, as one of the best depictions of abortion on screen. And it's talked about that way because it was such a pioneering depiction at the time. Really the first show that depicted abortion as legal, even though it was illegal in the country in general. It was legal in New York in 1972 when the episode aired. So that was a really big deal. Even I think the daughter even says to Maude, "Mom, it's legal now." So that's kind of like a discussion on the show. But it's also the first time that the drama centers around the character making the pregnancy decision instead of this man who's coming to save her, right? And even though it's really focuses on, will she have the abortion? Will she not have the abortion? It's very much gives her agency. It's really funny. It's really heartwarming. So it's a really different way to depict, a character thinking about having an abortion. And then she ultimately does have it, right? Which is very different even decades later.
Wow.
So I think, and that trend kind of continued through some of what we saw or what we see when we look at TV and film in the 70s and even 80s. There's this era of on-screen abortion normalcy almost, films like Fast Times at Ridgemont High in the 80s, Dirty Dancing in the 80s, a couple of more obscure films in the 70s where the character, usually we see one of two things, right? Either it's the character has an illegal abortion and because it was before Roe and it's really unsafe, so doubling down on those tropes, right. Or a character has an abortion and is supported by her friends or by her partner, and they support her emotionally, they help her cover for work. Those are things that we saw then that we actually don't see as much now. Yeah, Dirty Dancing exactly is one of my favorite examples, right? When the whole community in the film rallies around Penny to support her. Same in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, where the main character's friend takes her to the clinic and helps her pay for the abortion. And those tropes really drop off in the 90s.
Oh, interesting. So we've had this huge POV change essentially with Roe, from the medical provider, the savior character saving this woman from a terrible decision she made or what have you.
Yes.
Now we're focusing on the person who's having the abortion and making it in a more, I don't know if I would say positive light, but just giving this person more agency, more support. Okay? So what did you see happen in the 90s that was the next shift from this kind of more abortion inclusive story to what happened next?
Yeah. And I mean, it's not like it was all completely positive and representative, right? Like, it's still almost all white characters. It's still no queer characters, right? Which we also don't really see today. Still almost all wealthy characters, right? Although we see a little bit of that change, you know, when you think about movies like Dirty Dancing, for example. But it's just the narrative is so different than we saw in the 90s, which is when it really started to reflect some of the politics of what started to happen with abortion, right? When we started to see in real life kind of the ramp up of this vigilante domestic terrorism side of the anti-abortion movement, where they started to protest in front of clinics in a much more violent way, when they started to kill doctors, right? All of a sudden, that kind of like violence was represented more on screen, on TV shows like Law and Order and ER, all of those, like Chicago Hope, those kind of procedural dramas. And instead of being about the characters who were, you know, trying to decide if they wanted to have an abortion or not, it was about these like other main characters it was like a venue for them to talk about their abortion feelings. So there was often like one cop who was anti-abortion and Catholic, and one cop who was pro-choice and Jewish, and like they had to kind of like have this conversation while they're investigating a clinic bombing.
Right.
So that's how like it started to play out on TV in the 90s. And when a character was, you know, trying to decide if she wanted an abortion or not, it was often like a very emotionally driven. So it was this very like, will she or won't she? It was the era of what my colleague Gretchen and I like to call like the accidental miscarriage, right? Like she's on the way to the clinic. Oh, she has a convenient miscarriage on the way. Like she doesn't actually need to have the abortion. And we saw that on shows like Party 5, like very, very popular shows.
Right. There's a little bit more hand-wringing. We've again kind of brought the discussion from the person who is having the abortion or considering abortion to the provider or basically society at large, wondering what the morality of it is as opposed to like the person itself. Or if they're making the decision, they're doing a lot of hand-wringing. We're doing a lot of like all sides of on the
Yes, exactly.
Okay, interesting. So going forward, what's your point of view on studios and audiences' readiness for abortion? Do those two things differ at all?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at least like over the last, even like into the 2000s and over the last 10 years, we've really seen like a tremendous increase in the number of plot lines that have abortion stories, period. And I think, you know, that coincides with there being so much more TV to watch and ways to watch them. But I don't think it's a coincidence, right? Like there's more TV, but that doesn't necessarily mean that storytellers had to include more abortion stories. But they did, right? And we're also seeing more studios, work of women creators, of people of color creators, women of color creators, right? Like more support, although clearly not enough, you know, 20 years than there was 20 years ago. So my hope is that there's an appetite for these kinds of new, bigger, bolder stories about abortion. I think there's this unfortunate perception that audiences don't want to see abortion stories, especially like different ways of telling abortion stories where the character doesn't need to be really upset about her decision, or she doesn't need to be punished in some way for her decision. So I think there's just a lot of educating that goes on behind the scenes of network executives by writers who want to tell these stories, who have to explain, like, people want to see this. People are going through this in their real lives, and they want to see it represented on screen.
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking for ways. I mean, film and TV is how we normalize things in culture, how it's perspectives. And so the hope that is that as we become more inclusive with the creators that are allowed in Hollywood, those storylines would reflect the audience that are watching them and their experiences.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
And so my last question to you, maybe my favorite question, because this is a very actionable one, is how do we reduce abortion stigma and help audiences to recognize their internalized biases?
It's a really big question. And one one thing that's helped me is trying to understand like all the different ways that abortion stigma can show up in your life, from big overarching policies like abortion restrictions, to like finding out if the providers that you go to for your regular OB or GYN care provide abortions, or why they don't. If the communities in your if the clinics in your communities, like family health centers, provide abortions, or if they refer out, how do they talk about it? Just knowing where you would send a friend if they told you that they needed an abortion, and figuring out how you would feel about it and how to be supportive before that friend comes to you. Knowing, what the abortion support resources are in your community, in your city, in your state, your local abortion funds, your, abortion rights organizations. I think those, just getting kind of like abortion aware is really important. A lot of people, like, abortion doesn't come onto their radar until they need one or a friend needs one. So I think it's really important to be proactive, so right, and can counter some of the myths that you may, that may pop up along the way, like some of what you were saying before, right? People don't know that you can get abortion pills in the mail, that it can be safe, as long as you have the right information.
Right.
And it's important to know that, especially now, right? And also that you could be, it's like legally risky to do that, right? Medically safe, legally risky. So knowing, like, not to talk to the cops, not to post about it online, not to do a search on Facebook, all of those things, like, very important to be, digital security savvy. Like, how can you get ahead of that? How can you, have conversations about that with people who you're not sure how they feel about abortion, to help get them up to speed.
Right.
And I think as far as like on-screen representations go, one thing that I've learned is that a lot of writers and producers, maybe not showrunners, but writers, like, scroll through the hashtag of their shows, right? So if you like want to support something that you saw, you can tweet about it, or like post. I don't know that they really do Facebook as much, but I would say like tweet about it, maybe put on Instagram, TikTok, like wherever there are conversations happening, like talk about what you want to see, what you liked and didn't like.
And like
that's important too.
Show or the show runner or whoever is involved in the interesting. So what I'm hearing you say is maybe the two most important things that one can do are, well, there's a lot of disinformation out there regarding abortion. Go to really great sites and try to arm oneself with as much information so that if you need an abortion, you can be a resource to them. And then also, when you get in conversation with somebody who is anti-choice or doesn't know that much about abortion care, and your side of the argument as well. And then also, to, as far as TV is concerned, if you want to see a storyline, you have a critique about a certain storyline, going onto Twitter or Instagram and giving your feedback by text.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
For sure. Someone will see it.
Yeah. It's not just an echo chamber. There are people actually who are receiving on the other end.
For sure.
Yeah. Is there anyone who has any questions for Steph before we let her go? You have a chance here. I'll also say, if you guys haven't watched Miso yet, that is our short film of the month on repro. You can go to you can go to reprofilm.org to watch that until January 31st. And if you're looking for a good to get information about self-managed abortion and abortion pills, you can go to plancpills.org. They have a provider report card that breaks down prices and legality in your state, and it's a really great resource. So while not seeing any questions come in, so Steph, I think I'm going to wrap it up with you here.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us. That was so informative, and I'm going to have gained a lot by watching this. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Great to chat with you.